Okay, so welcome to this week's, and I guess technically last week's episode of my thoughts on Mobile Suit Gundam Gquuuuuux. We'll be covering episode 9 and 10 in this episode. Because I sort of ran out of time to give the other one out in time. So we're merging them together. So episode 9 starts off with Metru's re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, which we sort of saw at the end of episode 8. One thing I do want to mention about this episode is that it basically explains everything and sort of makes everything make sense contextually, I guess. And sort of all my actual issues with Gquuuuuux sort of at least explained away and swept under the rug with this episode, which I guess is okay. But yeah, so Metru re-enters the atmosphere, and then she essentially ejects out of the Gquuuuuux as like those ugly ass boosters on the back of the Gquuuuuux are like, at this point in time, look like it's like an injection system or something. It's like, oh, that's kind of neat. That's different. Obviously, it turns out it's something else, but we'll find out later. And then she wakes up in a mansion on Earth, and she's introduced to these two maids who basically tell her that the mistress essentially told them we should crash. And yeah, then she basically sort of sneaks out to go meet with the mistress as she sees someone outside who she thinks probably some sort of mental connection, right? And it turns out they're at a brothel. And yeah, so it turns out the mistress is Lala, and so basically what's happened is Lala is basically seeing like every single reality in existence of herself falling in love with Char. As essentially what normally happens is he goes to the brothel and essentially pays for her freedom and then drops off Fernandogan Institute, or whatever it's called. So this is why everything's different. It's technically it's effectively an alternative reality, or if that makes sense, like some sort of like it's not like there's something happened and the thing split. It is an alternative reality, which sort of does explain why everything looks ugly. So we can put that down to that. But the idea here is that this is the one thing with major thing that changed is Char didn't go to this brothel. And that's how everything sort of cascaded from there. This is the splitting point. Ignoring the fact everything's ugly. Essentially what happened, the person who owns brothel is planning to essentially hand over Metru to the Xeon forces. And obviously Lala knows this, so they plan to create a distraction, which I think initially was intended to be like setting fire to a storage shed. But one of the maids was like, let's just burn the entire thing to the ground. So yeah, so she basically escapes, gets to it. She tries to take Lala with her, but she's essentially stays behind as she's waiting for Char to come see her. So maybe we'll find out. But yeah, so it turns out the skateboard thing is the core fighter. So we finally see a core fighter, which with how it is, essentially rather than being inside the Gundam, it's sort of like it's the cockpit of a Gundam connected to like some thrusters at the back of a Gundam. I think practicality wise it's like an escape system. This is actually better. From like I think like a survivability system, I think it's actually worse. Because the normal core fighters essentially they are encased entirely within the armor of the Gundam, right? And then the Gundam splits apart and they transform into the fighter form and fly off. And the trouble is, so in your combat, right, if someone shot you in a place or damaged your core fighter, the pilot's probably dead. But with this, someone could damage the actual core fighter and leave it basically inoperable while the pilot's still alive, basically. It's kind of like it's not well protected because it's half that's just hanging out the back of the suit, which isn't ideal, but that's sort of life. I will be curious to see. I'm assuming because obviously the redesign of the RX 78 2, I guess I should probably mention, doesn't look like it fits a traditional core fighter. So I do wonder if, so at one point I will probably do much bigger detailed look at it, if it does have something like this instead, which might work a bit better. But I'll have to have a better look. So next up, she basically, because essentially what's happening is the Gquuuuuux is going battle out into the ocean, and then she basically jets out, right? So she's now going into the ocean and essentially rejoins the Gquuuuuux and floats back up, where she's found by a submarine with Charlie on it, basically. So she's essentially recaptured. So she's allowed to escape, which they do mention. There's basically sort of a short scene to give context to it, essentially that she thinks she's just escaping. I mean, like, we don't know who. Someone's giving her directions to escape, and no one even on the actual ship itself knows who's doing that. But Charlie is receiving those messages and just like, nah, just let her go, because he knows she's going to lead her to the Rose, or Sharon, as that's what she's looking for. But she's looking for that so she can find Shuji, because that's what he's looking for. And then they pull something out of the ocean. Now, obviously, before they do that, ignore what I just said. So there she is, back in the ship, in her cell. But then they pull this out of the ocean. So this is the Rose of Sharon. It is Lala's mobile armor. And he does mention that it is something they had been working on but never completed. So he knows that it's what it is based on that, but like knows it also doesn't exist in this universe. And then there's an image of cockpit, as you can just see Lala there, essentially in some sort of coma or something. Like, so what this means is that everyone who's hearing the Kira is hearing Lala, because they're hearing, it's communicating. She's basically in some sort of state here, and has been able to communicate through psychommunes. And when they talk about the other side, which some of them do, they are meaning that an alternative universe where this one came from. And specifically this Lala isn't the Lala we know, because this doesn't show any signs of the damage that actually happened to it or killed her in the first place. This is going to be another alternative Lala, if that makes sense. But that sort of explains like the Kira sounds. Like, okay, that's why that makes sense. And it also means there's no one actually in the Gundam. It's just Shuji's just crazy, and he's somehow like interpreting what he's hearing through this Lala's communications or whatever. So that is the end of episode 9. We start off episode 10 with an opening ceremony for a solar array system. The point here is that Earth's going through a nuclear winter and they need to warm it up, so they're going to use a solar array system, which is in fact the same solar array system. Well, not the same, but the same thing. The solar array system that was used to, in this world, do significant damage to Solomon. And I don't know if Zeon actually made theirs. But one other thing was mentioned is in this universe, Gurren does still kill his dad. I don't know exactly how or when, but that does still happen. Yeah, so this is a picture of it here. It's all aimed at Earth. There's this is Chrysilia's ship coming into dock. And Gurren's still there, and we're going to have a meeting the first time in 5 years. And they mentioned there's some big Zams. Everyone likes big Zams. And yeah, then people on Chrysilia's ship are getting ready. So there's Xavier, and there's Neon, there's some other people getting ready for something. And she's also made some food to take with her, and he asks her to try, and she's like, no. I think she mentioned something about she only cooks for friends or something like that, which is fine. Yeah. Then, so there's a meeting between Celia Guerin, some random Admiral General guy, and I'm assuming this is the girl standing up to the secretary that Guerin's basically spent his entire time, like, he's mentioned to, like, the only thing he's doing, he's staying in this one basic place with this one secretary, which I'm assuming it's her. And next minute, oh yeah, and then we sort of have, I don't know if this happens before this, but essentially what's been happening is Charlie has been training Matthew. So this has been returning from sort of training session. The next minute, everyone's been gassed. Turns out that Chrysilla has a gas mask, like a form-fitting gas mask underneath her actual mask, which is literally, they accused her, like, you're the only one who can't be trusted, you're the one who always wears a mask. And then, yeah, they all get gassed. Then Charlie tells Matthew about, basically, it turns out the Jupiter expedition that he was on was essentially out of essentially some sort of horror movie and absolutely horrific, and they just magically got out of there. And that's sort of why he's sort of all for Char's plans, is that he's so, like, jaded because of what happened. Like, almost everyone in the expedition almost died, and they all came back and they all celebrated as stuff as heroes and shit, and he's just like, but, like, how bad things are. Then you have all the people on Chrysilia's ships leaving, which is Gohan's and Neon's Fred thingamabob. And the idea here is they're going to sneak attack the Big Zams. So they kill a couple, but then the last two, I think, are a bit of a trouble because they basically realize what's happening, but they still kill them, it's fine. Then after they've defeated the Big Zams, so it turns out Chrysilia had given Neon a letter with instructions of what to do afterwards. At this point, Charlie's like, oh shit, his plan to kill them both at the same time essentially not going to work because one of them's dead and essentially a Xeon Civil War has started. He's like, shit. Then he sends Matthew off to essentially start. I think he knows that essentially the solar ray system is essentially a different weapon. It is a solar ray, but it's disguising another type of weapon, and he basically sends her in to stop it. And this is Neon connecting to the control systems, and she has been given 2 sets of coordinates. Previous to this, one of the people was like saying, what about Gquuuuuuux, which is the space fortress, basically Guerin's hub of operations, and someone said, don't worry about that. So she puts in the first coordinates, and Gquuuuuux basically gets Zeknova, like a huge Zeknova. And it's sort of implied that the second coordinates are Earth, or at least something like maybe the Federation government building or something on Earth. Yeah. But then we sort of go out with Matthew's like going in, but then suddenly, this is essentially this series, this is not a Zaku Boy movement, when Xavier's like, this isn't Clanbat, as she's fucking surrounded by Gans. But luckily Charlie comes, and basically, so we end off with this episode of essentially Charlie is standing off against all these Gaians, and Matthew and Neon are standing off and they're going to fight each other. So as Neon knows, it's probably Matthew, but she recognizes it, and Matthew has no idea it's Neon. It's like, who is this? Who would do such a thing? And yeah, that is the end of episode 10. So we've got episode 11 to look forward to, and then 12, and that's it. Everything is really, really fast-paced. It kind of works. It kind of has been working how fast-paced it is, but still would have been a bit nicer. It had a few more episodes and could like cover things a bit better, I think. But yeah, so this is war. We're at war now. Don't know how long it's going to last for, as one side's of war is basically completely annihilated already. But yeah, thank you for coming everyone, and give us a like and subscribe, and also leave comments below if you have thoughts of your thoughts of Gquuuuuuux so far. I'd love to hear them.